So welcome back to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm Dr. Michelle Gordon, and today I am joined by Kristen Bowen. Kristen is the Magnesium lady, right?
And that unofficially.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I put out a call for podcasts on Facebook, and I'm in several groups of people who help other people, and I wanted to get some people to help us out with different things. And Kristen has a really great story around magnesium, and I thought that would be really helpful for our audience. And what happened with her was that she was taking Fosamax for osteoporosis, and she threw it back at her doctor and said, "I don't want to take this crap." And that was a big, and we're going to go into that a little bit during the show today. And what happened for her is she had a huge mindset shift about her health and being responsible for her health. And that is so in line with what I teach that it's really great. So I think we're going to just kind of get right into your story. But the main thing is what she does now. And I'm sorry, but I'm checking my phone to look at her info. So what she does now is she hand makes magnesium products. She has a website called Living the Good Life Naturally. And so it's all about natural remedies for medical conditions like autoimmune disorders and that sort of thing. And so I'm really excited to get into this with you today, Kristen. So let's hear a little bit about your background.
First, I want to say thank you. This is so exciting to me because I jumped on when you threw it out there in Rachel's group. I thought, oh, yes, I love podcasts. And then I saw the doctor. And I went, oh, wait a minute. We might be coming from two very different places. And then as I started researching you more, I realized you are my favorite kind of doctor. You are a doctor that we need more of because there are so many of us looking for doctors who are willing to think outside of the box. And in fact, today I got on my Instagram stories and was bombarded with, where is she? Can I find her? Can I interact? Because so many doctors within the system just have this thinking and they don't want to hear anything else. And so please experience the gratitude of all of us coming at you for being willing to look outside the box and put some other perspectives into how you care for your patients.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm a surgeon by trade. Mm-hmm. I have a group of surgeons who work for me. I have 3 other surgeons who work for me, and hopefully 4 soon. And we like to say in surgery that we heal with steel.
Oh.
So in surgery, I mean, we have to fix something that's broken. And so one of the ways that I introduce myself often is to say that I can fix almost anything, from a hernia to a computer. However, what I found as I started to age and as menopause hit me, that first of all, there was like all of the information out there on menopause was scattered and weird, and it wasn't organized well, and I didn't understand. And so I spent about 3 years researching as I was gaining weight from menopause. And having difficulty like moving my body and stuff. And what I found is that, there's 3 components, right? It's how you think, mm-hmm. how you move, and how you eat. Right. And in my program, we go into that in depth. And the biggest transformation comes when we get into how to think, although we have little changes along the way as people start to understand what's happening with their hormones, and as they start to understand how to eat for their best lives. And then we really move into how to think. And in the membership, we go into how to change behavior. So it's really a comprehensive package. But for me, I mean, what I found for me was that I had to really make some huge behavior changes if I wanted to feel well. Right. And I think that is something that not a lot of doctors talk about. And I think it's a lot fewer of us even think about it, because we, especially in America, are stuck in this rut of having to see, a patient every 10 minutes. Right. Because of how corporations have changed medicine. Right. I'm somebody who's really outside of that our practice, our practice doesn't take insurance. We do emergencies only. We work with the insurance companies. We don't, we make sure that the patients have the least amount that they have to have to get,
Right.
to get us paid. But at the end of the day, I mean, the practice is all about saving lives.
Right.
And so that's the difference, I think, there. And as I researched nutrition, I realized that, what goes with nutrition is a lot of woo. As you get your nutrition in place, what happens, I mean, at least what happened for me was that as I got more and more, I got my body in place and got the nourishment proper, then I needed to start nourishing my soul.
Mm.
And so then I kind of got into, and I talk a lot with my people about meditation and about finding God and how, we're really a piece of God. And so I really am, and I've really gone, full circle, because I was like super atheist and didn't believe in any of it. And then I came back to like looking. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of my background. So let's hear, so I'm outside of the conventional thing, other than the fact that, we still do perform surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need those surgeries at times.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I just think it's so exciting to meet more and more doctors who are thinking outside of the box. So for me personally, I was raised in a very Western medical home. My father is a doctor.
Okay.
He's deceased now. And so I was raised, if the doctor told you to do it, you did it. That was the culture of my home. And so I started having some health issues. I had a lot of autoimmune things growing up, and I hit osteoporosis very young. I was in my late 20s, early 30s.
Wow.
So they gave me Fosamax. So I started taking Fosamax, and there was no way I was going to spend the rest of my life with my nose dripping blood on other people's shoes.
And that's what happened for you when you took Fosamax. So let me just back up for a second and explain to the audience, because not everyone's going to understand what an autoimmune disorder is.
Okay.
So let me just explain that. So usually an autoimmune disorder is when your body kind of attacks itself. So in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is very common in older women, that's an autoimmune disorder. I have it. There is lupus, is an autoimmune disorder. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disorder. Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease. These are all autoimmune disorders, and there are many others. And some of them can be genetic, but for the most part, it's usually environmental. So if you want to take over then and tell us a little bit more about your story.
So I went back to the doctor, and it was my first of me personally breaking out of that thinking pattern, like what you've done. And I tossed it back at him, and I said, there has got to be a different way, because the side effects of that Fosamax for me were immediate blood dripping out of my nose. And every time I took it, it would just start to drip. And it was just, there was no way I was living life dripping blood. And a couple of times it dripped on friends' shoes, and it just socially, I was just, not living this way. And he looked at me and he goes, that's your only option. And it was something about the way he shrugged his shoulders at me that just, it just cracked me, but it was a good crack.
Right.
And that I realized is what I had been doing my entire life was going to the doctor, throwing all of my symptoms on him or her, and then expecting them to give me a pill to make me feel better.
So let's just talk about that for 1 second. First of all, I want to explain what Fosamax is for the audience. Fosamax is a bisphosphonate that is prescribed by doctors for women who have osteoporosis and men. So osteoporosis is a disorder where our bones, what happens is the way that we manage phosphate, it comes from our bones. And we are constantly building and rebuilding, breaking down and rebuilding bone. And that's how we get our calcium and our phosphate in our bloodstream. And if there is something wrong with one of those, then we can break down too much bone, and that can cause pathologic fractures, which are fractures that happen just for no reason. And it can cause a lot of pain. and it can cause, women, if you see women who are hunched over like that, it's called a dowager's hump. That's something that can happen from osteoporosis. So I just wanted to make sure that we, get the basics in. So the other thing is not everyone has a bloody nose from Fosamax, but obviously you did, and it sounds like it was really embarrassing.
Oh, it was horrible. And so it was just his attitude, like he didn't care. And I realized in that moment, it was just like this lightning bolt of how broken my pattern that I was bringing to him. I wasn't taking responsibility for my Diet Coke addiction. I wasn't taking responsibility for my sugar addiction. I wasn't taking responsibility for the poor sleeping quality that I had going on in my life. I'd stay up late, and I was taking responsibility for none of it. And it was in what I call a God moment that all of this just, I recognized, oh my goodness, you are not responsible to make my bones stronger. Right. I am not following your pathway. It is my responsibility. And I had that moment that was exhilarating. And then I had this crash of, how am I going to do it?
Yeah. Well, so let's just talk for 1 second about that attitude that you had beforehand. And that is that I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor's going to give me a pill. Right. So I'm sorry.
And I'm going to feel better with no side effects.
Right.
That's my expectation.
And well, not only is that your expectation, but that's what you're bombarded with from childhood because of pharmaceutical companies. So we have to make sure that we really put the credit where it's due. Now, doctors are given less than an hour of nutritional training in America, at least. I don't know about other countries, because we're taught pharmacology. We're taught pharmacology. We're taught to treat chronic illnesses so that the pharmaceutical companies will stay in business. Right. And the pharmaceutical companies' profits are going up, up, up. And, we're seeing obesity, go more, and our health is going down, down, down. And so we want to make sure, just for the audience's sake, just to give you the background, is that, remember, we are bombarded with pharmaceutical advertisements in America about, you take this pill and you're going to not have depression anymore, or you take this pill and you're going to feel great even though you have cancer. And so these are the advertising lies that we get bombarded with. If you have a Coke, right, have a Coke and a smile and you're going to change the world with Pepsi. Sorry?
I still crave them.
Oh, do you really? That's interesting.
I do. I love, but it's not actually the Coke. It's the experience growing up. My dad would throw me the keys to his truck. He'd throw me a couple dollars. I'd go drag Maine. I lived in a very small town. So it's not so much the Coke. It was the power. It was the freedom. So there was lots of things wrapped up into that Coke moment.
That's really interesting because I have a sugar cleanse that I teach the people who go through my course. And one of the things that we really look at are emotional triggers when it comes to food. And I talk about how when I'm craving potato chips, it's because I miss my dad.
Oh.
And, my dad introduced me to potatoes and we spent a lot of time. We'd go on road trips and we'd eat chips and he liked potatoes a lot, and that's kind of fun. And then brownies are my mom. And so it's important that we have an idea of what triggers us emotionally when it comes to food. And it sounds like for you, it was a powerful thing to be able to go get a Coke because you got freedom from it.
Yeah. My dad trusted me.
Yeah.
Truck and I got to, so many.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's really, really an interesting thing for everyone to hear, that one of the things that we want to make sure is that when we're doing things, what is our motivation behind it? We want to pay attention to that. And if you're continuing to have the Diet Coke or the regular Coke or any of it, pay attention to what that's feeding for you emotionally. I stopped in about 2012, maybe. I cleaned out everything. We decided to go paleo because we went to a nutrition conference and all the data showed that the paleo diet was probably the most healthy diet for us at that time. So I came home and cleaned out all the grains and and everything. And we still had some Diet Coke in the fridge. And about 6 months later, I said, I'm thirsty. I'm going to have this diet set Pepsi or whatever the heck it was. And I took one sip of it and I'm like, God, this tastes like poison. I couldn't drink it. It tasted gross. So, and then every once in a while I'll have a sip of a Coke. And if it's an American Coke filled with high fructose corn syrup, it tastes yucky. If it's from, if it's like a Mexican Coke or a European Coke, those aren't as bad. But American soda products are not that good.
Which is a whole nother podcast.
It sure is. It sure is.
We get crappier stuff than Europeans, and yeah.
Well, you know why though? It's because of corporations, right? It's because America is truly the land of the corporation and the home of the profit. And so, it's not the land of the free and the home of the brave anymore. And that's our thing, right? We've got a free market, and that's part of being American, and whatever there. But what happened was in America, and I talk about this in the program a lot, is that there were all these byproducts of farming, right? So back when the factory farms took over, and that was in the 70s and 80s, right? All of the small farmers went out of business and the factories took over. And there were byproducts. There were byproducts of the cotton farming. There were byproducts of the corn farming, byproducts of everything. And so they said, well, how can we turn this into some sort of a profit? And they started creating these horrible oils: cottonseed oil, rapeseed oil, grapeseed oil, canola oil, corn oil, that are, that have to be so manufactured that they're plastics at room temperature. And those are really bad for us. They affect us at an epigenetic level. And then and safflower oil, and then also high fructose corn syrup, which is a byproduct of the corn industry because there's such a glut of corn, and the government's paying them to continue to farm too much. So
I can remember my grandfather. He was a farmer, and I can remember him taking a stand and telling his sons who worked that farm with him and farm. Sometimes people will say to me, oh, you work so hard. And in my mind, I'm like, I am lazy, because that farm ethic, that work ethic that my grandfather instilled in us, and he was such an incredible worker to make that farm profitable. And I remember him taking a stand, and his sons, my father, saying, well, they're getting money from the government. We need to switch everything that we're doing. And my grandfather saying, that's not the kind of farmer that we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a buyout of that local farmer.
Yeah, no, that's true. And at the end of the day, I mean, I remember when I was in high school, and maybe even a little bit after, but there was this whole plight of the American farmer. And what's interesting is now what's happening is we're seeing regional cuisine we're seeing a resurgence of the local farmer and regional cuisine, and making sure that that the seeds are preserved, and that we're doing heirloom farming and things like that. And that's going to be a future podcast coming up. I'm going to be meeting with this woman, Kathleen Finley, who is the president of a local farm that I support called Glenwood. And she has a whole thing about regional farming. So make sure you watch that one. It's going to be really great.
My husband is passionate about the whole permaculture system and restoring the nutrients in the land, so that local farmer is growing that food, that the quality of nutrients are back. So yes, I will make sure to listen to that.
It's really, really important. Yeah. So so getting back to you, so you had a health crisis, you had a light bulb moment, or a lightning moment, and then what happened?
So then I stopped taking the Fosamax and needed to figure out what was I going to do, because I had such deep bone pain. My bones, they hurt. It was just bone pain.
Uh-huh.
And so I needed to do something to figure that out. And so I had some of my friends that were at the time that I considered very woo-woo. And they were very much into nutrition and making sure that you were getting your nutrients. And so I turned to those woo-woo friends and said, help me, what do I do? And so they were the ones that really turned me on to the benefits of old school bone broth, and that bone broth and getting those good, that glycine and that proline in, and getting those nutrients from that bone broth. And it just started this process of me taking responsibility for what went into my mouth. But when my bone density really started to change is after I had a complete crash. After I needed a bladder tie-up, I'd had my third baby, and called my sisters and said, what the heck? Every time I laugh or exercise, I am wetting my pants. And I always went to my older sisters for help, and they're like, oh, you just had baby number 3, so you need a bladder tie-up. So I went into my OBGYN. My bladder had fallen, and they scheduled me for a surgery. So I went in, had the surgery done, and on the table, they coded me several times. It was a rough surgery. It was not just your average go in, get the bladder tie up, get off the table.
Was it through the abdomen, or did they operate through the vagina?
They went in through the vagina.
Okay.
And so went home. It ended up staying longer. They had a hard time keeping my blood pressure stable.
Yeah.
So a couple days longer, went home and started blacking out. I'd stand up, I'd black out, and then started having seizures. And we were like, what the heck?
Wow.
So went back into the hospital. We'd go back and forth. I'd stay for a couple days. They'd get me on fluids. They'd stabilize me. They couldn't find anything. They'd send me home. And that kept going on for about 2 years. And it
sounds like an adrenal problem to me.
It was incredibly stressful on my family. We had just adopted 2 children from the foster care system.
Oh, wow.
And so their transition of coming into our home and needing stability. So it was just stress all over the place.
Now, wait a minute. You have 5 children then?
I have 6.
You have 6 children. You're just like Rachel.
Yeah, I have 6. And so long story short, is what happened was a couple of things. I had a reaction to the titanium screws. And at the time, they thought titanium was inert. And now they know that some people with autoimmune issues have an issue with that titanium. So I had that happening from the titanium screws. And we were in Arizona at the time, and my cadaver graft that they used for the sling to put my bladder in was bought on the black market and had mold on it.
Oh, no.
So it was the combination of those 2 things. But in the process of figuring that out, it was a 3.5-year process. And I got down to 70 pounds, lost a lot of my hair, seizures every day, in a wheelchair. And I couldn't even tell you my name, let alone that I had 6 children. So my quality of life was just non-existent. So I had a friend. The seizures were happening, and every time I had a seizure, I would lose bladder control, so I'd wet my pants. And I had a friend that came over and said, hey, this person has introduced us to magnesium. And I said, oh, I take magnesium. I take it orally. And she said, no, not synthetic oral magnesium. I want you soaking in it, and I just want to see if it's going to make a difference for your seizures. Please know, I am not saying the magnesium took away all of my seizures, because it didn't. And I never would want someone who's out there, because when you're in that place of desperation, you just start doing anything and everything. And so I want to be very clear that the magnesium did not take away all of my seizures. It did slow them down, and it made my recovery time, because after a seizure, I just felt like I'd been run over by a Mack truck.
Now, let me just ask you this. What kind of seizures were you having? Were you having grand mal seizures, or?
So the type of seizure they have never determined, because they stopped after the titanium and the cadaver graft was taken out. And so they were what was the name? I have to look at my medical records. They were something seizures. They never could determine. It was not a grand mal seizure.
Okay.
So, but the magnesium helped me recover faster, because after I'd have that seizure, it was just like a Mack truck had run through my body, and I was exhausted, just exhausted to a point that I wasn't functional for my
So
family.
let me just get some history here. So you went through this for 3 years. You discovered that you had, you already knew that you had autoimmune issues.
Autoimmune
And
depression going into it.
yeah, and then you found out, okay, well, maybe it's the titanium. And so they went in to take that out, and they decided to remove the sling as well.
So we always wondered, did they leave a sponge? You hear of surgery, did they leave something in? So my husband just started taking me to different doctors saying, what do we do? How do we get this woman functional again?
Right.
And so we went to Stanford, we went to Mayo Clinic, and the diagnosis that I received was not what I was experiencing, and we knew that. And so we basically at that point were financially bankrupt. My husband had to take a leave of absence because my health was so bad. And so we had to buy back our insurance, and that COBRA is very expensive. We had a year that financially we knew that we could make that. And we were now at 15 months. And so he went back to work. My mom came and helped, and he just kept researching, and he was in the new area that they'd located us at with his new job, and he heard this PA, a physician's assistant, that was talking about out-of-the-box things, like you, an out-of-the-box thinker. And he wasn't talking anything seizures or hormones or anything, but just he recognized this man's willing to look outside of the box. And so he took me to him, and the PA said, I don't know what is happening, but it's obvious we need to figure it out and put some puzzle pieces together for your wife. I love researching. And so he started researching, called us back and said, would you be willing to have a surgery done where we take the titanium out? I think that's what's triggered you, is the titanium. And for us, that was a huge decision, because the last time I'd been on the table, I'd coded several times. But my quality of life was so non-existent that we decided together as a family, we decided we need to go this route. And so when he got in there and saw that it was a cadaver graft that was bought on the black market, there was no markings on it and there was mold on it, he opted to take that out also. And I knew coming out that I felt better. Definitely had a lot of room that I needed to put my health back together, but I could remember who I was. And in that 3.5-year block, my youngest child, I have no memory of her walking or talking, those milestone things that a mother holds dear. Yeah. I have no memory of that. So I knew coming out of that surgery that we were on the right path, because I could process and think.
So question then, are you still incontinent of urine, or did they fix that?
No, they did not fix that. I fixed that.
I see. Okay. So
every time they touched my bladder, it got worse. And so I finally realized, they try something on my bladder problem gets worse. Stop having them mess with my bladder. So no,
Okay. So before we get into how magnesium helped you, what did you do to stop the leaking?
So I changed my eating and how I ate, and I increased my collagen, I increased micronutrients, and I started exercising. I reduced my cortisol and kept that cortisol issue in check. And I'm able to, for example, last week I was with grandbabies and I jumped on the trampoline, no bladder issues whatsoever. So.
Okay, so let me just explain. So the cortisol is a hormone or a steroid that we produce, and we produce more when we're stressed. It comes from the adrenal gland, and it's also, we can use it exogenously. So it's one of the things that bodybuilders will use along with insulin and some other things to help build up their muscles. But an excess of cortisol which is the precursor to cortisone. And excess of this steroid will cause fatigue, belly fat, disrupted sleep. So I just wanted to make sure we put that in there, because they the people who watch the podcast probably don't really know that. So all right, so you were able to decrease your stress levels and get your cortisol under control. Did you do a lot of Kegels?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Kegels are when you contract the pelvic floor. Any woman who's been pregnant knows what they are, because we're all taught to do those, and that can be a way of rehabilitating yourself after having a baby, after having surgery. In France, actually, when a woman has a baby, they have a whole bunch of vaginal rejuvenation type of it's like physiotherapy, and they don't do that here, but there's like an exercise thing that they put inside the vagina and to squeeze. I don't recommend anything from Goop. So I just want to go out there and say, don't take a porcelain egg and put it in your vagina and hold it there, because that's not good for you. I don't like Goop at all, and I just want to be because I still am a scientist, even though I believe in some of the woo stuff. I wouldn't do anything that's recommended by Goop. So that's all I want to say there. Now, in terms of nutrition,
yeah,
you talk a lot about bone broth, and I've actually got a recipe for bone broth that we'll hook up into the show notes. If you're a vegetarian, you can get antlers from animals that just they fell off or whatever, and you can still get the good stuff from bones without having to kill an animal. And even David Wolf, who is a proposed vegan and really proposes the whole, he really pushes vegetarianism. My understanding is that he will eat antler broth, because our bodies need that. The human body co-evolved with animals, and so we need collagen from animals. But anyway, I'll hook that up. But one of the things, and as I was doing my research, is I read this book by Kate Shanahan called Deep Nutrition, and I don't know if you've read that. Yeah, and she's the so Dr. Kate Shanahan is the nutritionist, or she was at least the dietary consultant for the Los Angeles Lakers. She had a story very similar to yours. She talks about in the book where, she couldn't run. She was losing bone. She was like, she snapped her Achilles. And that's when she started to realize, the dangers of vegetable oils and stuff. So I really highly recommend her book, Deep Nutrition, and we'll also link that up in the show notes. So, all right. So let's hear more about what happened. I want to hear more about what happened with magnesium primarily.
I started feeling better, gradual improvements, but that bone fatigue, I just couldn't get rid of that bone fatigue. And so it was through soaking in the magnesium. And then somebody said to me, a naturopath said, I want to know what your magnesium RBC is. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I just soak in the magnesium and definitely have seen benefit. It's working. And he said that magnesium red blood cell count is so crucial for you to understand how you're managing your cortisol levels versus your magnesium soaking. So I went in and had the magnesium RBC test done, and I was at a 3.4. And that's not even close to where you need to be. And so here I thought I was doing so well, managing my stress, managing my magnesium, getting those deeper nutrients into my body, but I needed to do it more. And the thing I loved about having that test done was it helped me again have one of those light bulb moments where I realized I'm not doing enough when it comes to my mindset. I still need to focus on this area and really wrap it into deeper gratitude. I'm a huge believer in creating gratitude. And so it was through that process of watching my magnesium levels change on that RBC testing as I stepped into deeper gratitude, the RBC levels would go up, because when we get stressed, when that cortisol kicks in, our magnesium levels go down. And my body needed more magnesium. And that was that moment when I recognized that everything started moving more quickly and more easily, because bones don't rebuild overnight, and it's not an overnight process to go from osteoporosis to what I have now, which is strong bones. I'm a grandma of 7 in my mid-50s, and my bones on my bone density scan show up like a woman in her late 30s. And so it's not an overnight process, but understanding that connection between holding on to my magnesium with my mindset and my thoughts, and making sure that those magnesium levels were staying up in the 6.3 level so that my bones could rejuvenate and rebuild, was just a powerful moment for me. And it's literally what I help women do every day now.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with that particular test, so I can't really speak to it, but I can speak to the power of the subconscious mind. And there is a book actually by Joseph Murphy called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. I recommend that book. It was written in the
You
60s.
and I are kindred spirits.
Yeah. So it was written in the 60s, I think, 1962. He was a pastor, and he talked a lot about how the subconscious mind is so powerful. So whether or not you have a spiritual practice, even just by suggesting something to your subconscious, when you suggest it the right way, you will work on it all the time. And so, as part of my practice, every single night, I've got a series of 8 affirmations that I do every single night about how I want my life to be, how I want my body to feel, where I am, that sort of thing. But I can't talk about that. I mean, when you're going to fix your osteoporosis, it's not just magnesium. I mean, you have to look at calcium and phosphorus as well.
Absolutely. But I started with magnesium, and that uptake of magnesium was a game changer. It moved my vitamin D levels, which had always been very, very low. And I'd taken so much synthetic vitamin D3 that my stored vitamin D was higher than my active vitamin D, and the magnesium helped manage and rebalance all of that. So definitely, it's not the only thing, but it's a starting point that so many women need to understand. Magnesium is the first step to building those bones and getting those nutrients aligned.
So what's interesting is that I do think that we are chronically deficient of magnesium. I used to get migraine headaches, and I started. I was taking things like I took Topamax for it, but then I had trouble cognitive issues from it, so I decided to stop it. I would take Imitrex when I had a headache, and it's funny because doctors, we think that are living through chemistry, right? Because that's how we're taught. And then I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to put this crap in my body. And when my wife went through Andrew Weil's course on integrative medicine, we learned a little bit about magnesium, and I started taking it, and I don't get migraines anymore. I take magnesium glycinate, and I take a couple of those twice a day. And what I recommend for my patients and for anyone who follows me is I say, you can take as much magnesium as you want, because your body's it's going to go out. And what really happens is, if you take too much magnesium, you can get flaccid muscles, because we give magnesium to women who are in labor prematurely. And so flaccid muscles, I mean, if you take too much, you're going to really have trouble there. But that's really hard to do by taking it orally. And then you're going to get diarrhea.
Right.
Too much magnesium. I'm a big believer in Epsom salt baths.
Epsom salt baths are great. The problem with them is they're not going to move your magnesium red blood cell. And that's when everything started to click for me in my body, and my body chemistry started working better with my depression and my health. And so for me, my ultimate goal is to keep that magnesium red blood cell number between 6.3 and 7. I love Epsom salts and the sulfates that are in them, but there's not enough magnesium in them. And so adding that beautiful magnesium brine, that magnesium chloride, and soaking in it has just been a game changer for me.
And where do people get magnesium chloride?
You can get it numerous places. And so I started using different kinds, and then started getting some some issues from it. So the magnesium that I use now is one that my company imports because we test it for the heavy metals. I don't want magnesium that's watered down, and I don't want magnesium that's high in heavy metals. You can get it from a place in Russia, that we have a source in Russia. You can get it from Utah, but both of those sources are high in heavy metals. And so I want it coming from the Zechstein Sea. Right now, currently, it's the cleanest. And then I want it not watered down for profit. I want it that pure that comes out of the sea with those nutrients that are commingling in there with the magnesium.
So what we'll do is in the show notes, we'll link up, we'll have a link to your site, and people can buy the magnesium from you there. And what, I can't speak to this magnesium or RBC. I don't know anything about it. And so to me, it sounds kind of pseudoscience-y. You're getting, especially since it's coming from a naturopath. So doctors and naturopaths are not, we don't always get along.
So the blood serum test that a Western medical doctor has will show that blood serum level, and it pretty much always stays at 1% because the body will pull that magnesium to keep that blood serum at 1% because magnesium.
Yeah, usually we see 1.8 grams per deciliter is usually the 1.8 or higher is normal. I mean, I think, and then it can go too high. I mean, if I remember correctly, if it over 4 something is too high, and that's something that we check a lot. I mean, I always check magnesium because you can't get potassium up without having magnesium up. They go together.
Red blood cell just shows around the red blood cell, and it is just a different way of looking at it. I go online. I don't go through a naturopath to have it done. I go to walkinlabs.com and I order the magnesium RBC test. It's about $49, and had a collision.
Something broke, right?
And I order that test, and it's a great way to take accountability for and it's a great way to show how I'm managing. It's
right. So
to show how I'm managing my stress levels.
Sure. So the thing is like, how are they? Do you know the mechanism of how they're getting it out of the? I mean, are they crushing the red blood cells?
I don't know if they're crushing. I'll look into that. I don't know if they're.
Okay, just because, I mean, I know, like, if you lyse the red blood cells, if the red blood cells are lysed, then a lot of your electrolytes are wrong. They're not going to be good because, potassium will go up and all sorts of things. So it's hard for me. I can't endorse the test because I don't understand it. Right. So I want to kind of stay away from that because I can't really endorse this red blood cell without knowing about it. Right. So I do agree with you though that we need more magnesium, and soaking is one of the best ways to get it. It makes it kind of relaxes you. I like to take a magnesium bath before I go to bed. It helps me to kind of relax and wind down for bed. I think the other thing that would be good for us to talk about is the link between nutrition and depression. We are a chronically depressed nation.
Oh, so much so.
And we're overfed and undernourished. That's, we are run by corporations that want us to go and spend our money on pharmaceuticals and fast food. Yeah. And what I like to tell people is that if it's coming out of a box or a package, it's not good for you. Even if they say it's organic, even if they say that it's paleo, even if they say that it's, keto, whatever your dietary choices are, the best way to eat is whole real food. Now I'm guilty of it. I'll eat Quest chips from now and again. I'll eat peanut butter, things that come out of a package, but we want to make sure that we're getting it as close to the source as possible. And that's where, when, even when we talk about organic corn, for example, if you're going to eat corn, it's a grain, but if you're going to eat corn, right? Corn is genetically modified. The corn that we eat, even if it's organic and grown naturally and whatever, we took that corn that we saw in America when we first came over and bred it to be a certain way. Just like the dogs that, the purebred dogs, they're bred a certain way for certain genetic traits. And so when you say genetically modified, the thing that I don't like about genetically modified food is Roundup Ready anything.
Yeah.
So it's already got glyphosate in it, and and that's probably what everyone's allergic to, is anything that's Roundup Ready.
Yeah.
Because what they did was they took Roundup and they put it into the genetics of the organism so that the bugs would stay off of it.
I think it's so interesting because we can also pick up on that mentality that we can go to the health food store, and because we're buying it from a certain section, that it's healthy. For me personally, someone who has struggled with black hole depression her entire life, if I eat corn, my inflammation goes up. If my inflammation goes up, my depression is worse.
Yeah.
And so I think people understanding what triggers them. Now, somebody else, they might be able to handle it. I personally can't. Corn is one of my trigger foods in any form, whether it's corn that's bought at a health food store or, corn that you're just buying out of a box. And so understanding those food triggers, I think, are crucial, because that inflammation linked to depression was not anything that was ever talked about when I was trying to put pieces together to feel whole and to feel happy every day.
Yeah, so inflammation is a huge, huge part of it, and anything that comes out of a box is going to increase your inflammation. And I have noticed over the years, when, like, if I'm in a real good groove with my exercise, say, and then I go out and I have something that's fried, like I'll eat French fries or something, I will immediately lose my motivation.
Yeah.
And I'll immediately get depressed. And that's because I'm eating vegetable oil, which is poison. It's stuff that's not meant for human consumption.
Yeah.
It's this odorless, tasteless, cheap stuff
Yeah.
that is really bad for us. And so it's funny because I can see it happening now that I understand a little bit more about how to be the observer in my life. I can
I
see
love
it
that.
happening.
The observer in your life. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So now that, because I can look from outside and say, this is happening. Why is this happening? And what led up to it? And that's what I love about behavior change, right? Because if we can remove the emotion from it and just look at things objectively and say, okay, this happened, and now, and just like, a lot of times if we want to have some sort of a behavior change, we have to take the time to really be the observer about it.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you said in the beginning too, understanding the connections. I'm connected to that Diet Coke because it represented a lot of things in a very important relationship to me. And so observing that emotion instead of buying into it and reacting on it, and then understanding the connection behind it, will help you make choices that are better. Because so many times as women, we're trying to look for the perfect diet and look for more information and look for better, 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 better. But are we really doing those things that we already know is what I call grandma wisdom? Are we sleeping well? Are we hydrated? Are we eating our vegetables? And so I think connecting back to what we know and taking action on it is crucial.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the things that we don't seem to learn, especially with the American food pyramid, right? In doing the research, the food pyramid was drastically changed in the 90s. But would you taught the food pyramid as a kid? Because I remember getting taught it in elementary school.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I watched this documentary, Vinny Tortorich's documentary called Fat. And he said, the food pyramid was invented in 1994. And I was like, I don't think so. Because at the base of the food pyramid is grains. And at least that's what it used to be. I remember this, you eat grains as the main thing. And it was just a way for the government to make sure that the farms that they were subsidizing was making, was getting paid. Because if you look at what happened with food throughout history, especially in America, right? So we've been in the biggest food experiment. It's like 40 or 50 years since the 70s, when Ansel Keys came out and said, fat is what causes heart disease, and demonize fat. You can actually see, when you look at it, you see a geometric rise of diabetes. Because as manufacturers said, okay, we got to get the fat out. Fat's no good, low fat. They added sugar. They added crappy oils, and they added, these refined carbohydrates. And then we see inflammation increase, we see diabetes increase, and diabetes is another form of autoimmune disorder. And what's happening is in type 1 diabetes, the pancreas just eats itself and doesn't work. And that usually happens in children, although it can happen in adults. But in type 2 diabetes, it's insulin resistance, and it's because we never give the pancreas a rest. And of course, the food manufacturers, food in quotes, don't want us to learn. They want us to continue to eat the sugar and eat the processed carbs that keeps our pancreas going, that then feeds the insulin manufacturers. So it is a vicious circle.
Yes.
But the way to uninflame yourself, because I think we should teach people this, is to eat more vegetables.
Yeah.
Eat more vegetables.
I'd love to know your take on the whole smoothie craze versus eating vegetables.
Chewing is important, but you know what? Because we are so overfed and undernourished, I like the idea of smoothies, because if you take a whole bunch of fresh vegetables, I drink 1 to 2 green smoothies a day. And what I put in them is in a big batch, it'll make about 6 of them. I put 1 avocado, I put a bunch of celery, some cucumber, and then something green like kale or spinach or lettuce, all these things together. And then I'll drink it. I add salt. And I don't like fruit. I don't put fruit in it because I'm off sugar. And it doesn't bother me. Right.
I love smoothies. I do feel better when I am getting good old-fashioned side of vegetables on my plate too. And so for me personally, and I think this is something that especially women, they need to really determine what works for them. And I just bought into that whole smoothie movement, like, oh, smoothie, and I dropped any other types of vegetables. And for me, I feel better with both. And I think it's so crucial that we become the CEO of our life and our decisions. And my journey might be a little bit different than your journey. Yeah. And really customizing it for what works for each one of us, because I do better when I love smoothies. I do better when I've just got a good old fashioned plate of vegetables going on.
So I'll eat at least one salad a day. I eat 1 big salad a day, and then I'll have a smoothie that has all the green stuff in it that I don't want to. Like, I don't want to eat a bowl of kale. I think it's disgusting. I don't like eating kale. I don't like the taste of kale. But if I put it in a smoothie, it's palatable. I just don't like kale. It gets stuck in my teeth. It's got a weird consistency. It's ugh. I don't like spinach either for that same reason. Spinach, when I eat it, coats my teeth. I don't like how it feels. And so
I love how it tastes, but it's one that gets stuck in my teeth.
Yeah. So I don't mind having it as a smoothie because what's going to happen when you start drinking smoothies every day is you're going to see a big change, especially if you drink more water. If you don't drink more water with it, I mean, remember, we really should be drinking about 4 liters of water a day, and average we'll drink maybe 2 glasses, which is about 16 ounces. So there's a few things that
walking around.
What's that?
Chronically dehydrated people walking around.
Yeah. So if you want to take some action, right? So now, let's get into a couple of actions that people could take. One of them would be to drink more water. Another one would be to, have a smoothie. You make it at home. I'm not a big fan of juicing. I think you need the fiber. So you want to make sure that you're having smoothies. And if you want to have them in a way that makes them palatable, you can add half an apple to it. And that's going to make it sweeter and easier to tolerate. But at first, when you start something like this, when you've been conditioned to eating the foods that the corporate America wants you to eat, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a bit of a behavior change. And then the other thing is to get away from all the grains with your meals and go with vegetables. Cauliflower is a very, very versatile vegetable, and it's a great way to get started with stuff. And on my website, actually, you can get free recipes from my cookbook. So if you go to drmichellegordon.com, there is a download for like 5 or 10 free recipes that you can get, that can get you started on how to use vegetables in your diet. So those are a couple of action steps. And then the other thing is to, increase your magnesium by, by soaking in the magnesium salts, this magnesium chloride that we can get from your website that we're going to hook up in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you have depression now, I want to speak to this because there is such a thing as a clinical depression that, can get better with medication. But if you have a depression or a depressed mood or something, take a look at what you're eating, because while I'm never going to say don't take your medication, because if you have medication for depression, you may need it. And obviously we've found that if you abruptly stop medication, you can get suicidal, and we don't want that. Right. So it's really, really important. But just pay attention to if you're just aware of what you're eating and how what you're eating can really contribute to the inflammation that can piss your brain off to the point of making you depressed. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. I think we can, listen. I'm thinking of the women that are going to be listening to your podcast, Dr. Gordon. And one of the things is women, we get overwhelmed so easily. And so you've thrown out such beautiful things that people can do to take more responsibility and more accountability for their health. And sometimes, though, listening to one more podcast, listening to more action items can overwhelm women. And so I think it's so important as women, when we're learning new things and when we're stepping into a higher sense of accountability, because that overwhelm will kick in and that overwhelm will stop us and disconnect us from doing those things that we need to do. And I think just taking a moment and looking at what we're doing already and celebrating it.
Absolutely.
Celebration will move us forward so that we can add more of those beautiful action items that you've given us.
Yeah. So what I like to say is that there is no such thing as motivation, right? Motivation comes from action. And when you start to see results, you want to do it more.
Yeah.
Right. And so it is important to stop and take the time to recognize your wins as you're growing and making the changes. And so it's what's really important is to keep track, because if you don't keep track, what's going to happen is, like for the women who get off sugar in my group, right? If they don't keep track and realize that that's what they've done, it's like all of a sudden they're noticing that they have more energy, that they're going to the gym, that they've hired a trainer, or that they're biking to work, or all these things. And like, oh, I have more energy, but they don't realize where it came from. So it's really important to keep track of where you are now, where you want, and know where you want to be, and then keep track as you get along. And we're just, giving you some
for connection.
What's that?
I love that, tracking for connection.
Yeah.
To it, that's where the health starts to go.
Yeah, it's really, really important. And especially if you're looking to change your health, to keep track of what you're doing and how you feel. And as you change your diet, it's really important too. And remember, if you make a mistake, if you go out and eat that cookie, or you have a Coke or whatever, that you look at that as an experiment rather than as a failure, because it's really easy to take, let's say you've spent 2 weeks now, and I think there was a little video I had going around about this, but you take 2 weeks and you're off sugar for 2 weeks, and then someone gives you ice cream. You eat the ice cream, and does that give you permission now? How do you do it? Do you look at it as a failure, and now you're going to eat pizza and chips and everything else? Or are you going to say, okay, I did this. I liked it when I was eating it. I don't feel so bad now, but I want to go back to what I was. Or, wow, I really felt gross after eating that. This is something I really shouldn't eat. And I like to put it back to me and marijuana.
It's about you and marijuana.
This is very funny. So I don't like marijuana. I smoked a lot of marijuana when I was a kid. I spent like a whole year high, right? I was like 15 years old, and I was always smoking pot and whatever. And then when I became an adult, I tried it a couple times. And you know what? I felt like that rebellious teenager, and I felt like super paranoid, and I was like, you know what? This isn't for me. And so for me, it is not even a temptation. I don't like how I feel when I use that stuff. So it's just something I don't do because I don't like it. And so if you can look at and this kind of goes back to tips for behavior change, right? If you can look at how something makes you feel, and again, you got to pull the emotion out of it. You've got to be super objective and say, this made me feel this way, so therefore I don't do it. That's why I don't really drink much anymore, because it's fun, it tastes good, and then like I feel like shit. I feel really, really crappy. It's like I have a headache when I wake up and that sort of thing. And so it's like I just don't do it. So
that connection is crucial to make that connection.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. I want to so magnesium helped you to get your bones back.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
And
didn't completely do it on its own.
No.
The first step to put things into place to rebuild my bones.
Yeah, and I do agree with you that we're chronically deplete of magnesium, and so magnesium baths, or we can hook up to we're going to hook up to your website so people can learn more about you, and this is just absolutely fascinating because you
throw out a code, and they use Dr. G for their code, and they can get 10% off.
Oh, great! Yeah. DRG.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So, but we're going to hook that up in the show notes, and then we'll also put down that you can use the code Dr. G to get the 10% off. That's awesome. Thanks so much for that. And just you've had such a great. It's such a really great story around how your health, was really you were dying. Yeah. You were dying. And you had these pollutants in your body. You finally got them out, and then with the help of magnesium, you got your whole life back. Yeah. And that's such a miracle story.
This morning, one of my favorite things to do is we live right on the Pacific coast on the ocean, and I love being up when that sun comes up in that water, and it is something I do not take for granted.
Yeah.
That I am living this life that is full, that is where I want to live, and I have time freedom, and it's not something I take for granted. So I have incredible levels of gratitude for where I'm at.
All right, that's great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, and I hope to have you back again.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye. Hi, it's Dr. Michelle Gordon, and thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement podcast. I wanted to do some clarification because during my interview with Kristen Bowen, we talked about the red blood cell test for magnesium. And at the time, I wasn't familiar with it. So I've done some research, and the red blood cell test is more sensitive to magnesium deficiencies than a standard magnesium blood test. And what happens when the body becomes deficient of magnesium, the magnesium in the red blood cells is pulled out. So it's really leached out and then used by the body. And so if you suspect that you are magnesium deficient, then you want to do this red blood cell test. And I wasn't aware of it. It's not something that I ever prescribe. I check magnesium regularly as a surgeon, but I don't check magnesium as a primary care doctor. So this has been a learning experience for me as well. And it's important to have the right level of magnesium because we need it for the electrical functions of our muscles and for our brain. And so if you think that you're magnesium deficient, make sure you go and get this blood test. I did a quick Google search, and at LabCorp, it's about $49. Of course, you'll need a doctor to prescribe it. So that's the update on this episode. Thanks so much again for being a part of the Menopause Movement podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and review. Have a fantastic day.